So this was originally intended to be a reaction video, but as some of you already know, that isn't really going to happen, mostly because of technical difficulties. Upon further reflection, though, I'm really glad that that was the case, because it gave me a little bit more time to think about what I wanted to do here. So, stick around. Hi squad, welcome back, and dog bless you. If you would like that welcome back to be a little bit more contextually appropriate, please feel free to subscribe. Or, don't. I'm not your dad. This video is intended for anyone who considers himself a Blaire White fan, or even has been drawn in a little bit from time to time and just kind of finds themselves agreeing with a lot of what she says, or even some of what she says. The reason that I'm not actually doing the reaction video that I planned on making was because Blaire already has an incredibly large platform. I don't want to use my small little channel and meager following to just give her further visibility by featuring any of her clips or the things that she's talked about and how she frames them. I also know that, just realistically speaking, Blaire would never see it, let alone take any criticisms into consideration and make positive changes in her life if she did. Initially, I held the belief that Blaire got into the hot water that she sometimes finds herself in by just kind of pouncing when she hears about something without actually taking the time to do proper research and consider the situation fully. That is, that she was missing certain important details just through lack of taking time and taking care, not necessarily with explicit ill intent. I have since come to realize, however, that her negative spin on things is far more likely very much deliberate. And I know there are people who are going to hear me say that and be like, well, yeah, obviously, but this, like I said, is specifically for folks who might find themselves on the fence or maybe don't really understand the problems at play. But how could it not be intentional when she continues to profit off of it? And as the cycle continues, she gets more and more shameless about it, enough that she doesn't even bother feigning ignorance anymore. So, like I said, I'm here to appeal to her followers, whether or not they're open about that fact or just kind of quietly find themselves drawn in. And I want to start just by asking a couple questions. Do you believe yourself to be someone who values honesty? Do you consider yourself a person who prioritizes good information? And if you're a trans person or a trans ally, do you consider yourself someone who cares about the well-being of trans people and improving their lives? If your answer to all of those questions was no, you do you. There's not really a whole lot for us to talk about if that's the case. But if your answer was yes to any of these questions, the next one I would get you to ask yourself is whether or not supporting someone who actively goes against any of those values is a good thing to do. Now I'm going to get into my whole take on the Blaire White situation. People like Blaire build their success as marginalized people by throwing other members of their marginalized community under the bus. And as much as Blaire insists that she likes being trans, that's not really what her behavior indicates. I mean, think about it. She could platform other trans people and give us more visibility and help our public perception very easily. Instead, she seeks out the most problematic members of the trans community or misrepresents completely innocent ones, specifically so that she has material to show to the cis people that she's desperately trying to impress that says, see, I'm not like them. And honestly, I understand where this compulsion comes from. Trying to carve out a place for yourself in a world full of people who are very keen to reject you is a hard thing to do. The easiest course of action is to appeal to the people holding the power, so that even if they still view you as an outsider, they at least give you enough of a pass that you can live comfortably. This is where Blaire's criticisms of trans activists and commentators, like me, comes into it. She frames our unwillingness to play sycophants to cis power structures as an example of why we don't deserve voices, representation, or recognition. When in reality, the rest of us have just realized the futility of compromising on behalf of people who hate us on the basis of our biology. I've gone off about it before, and I will many times over, but people are placated by validation. Not in the sense of having good things said about them, but by being told that the beliefs and ideas that they already hold are true, whether those are negative or positive. This is an attractive notion for most people, because being told that we're already correct about something spares us the really exhausting undertaking of having to challenge ourselves and change. This is how Blaire draws people in and keeps them hooked. It's a method with two primary features. The first is appealing to the pre-existing superiority complex in her cis audience.
All those things you think about trans people, totally justified. I myself am a trans person. I see it from the inside. And it's very important that you know you are correct. You're correct in your assessment. And anyone trying to make you feel bad about it, is just reactive and hypersensitive.
This sends a message that not only are they better just on the grounds of being cis, they are also correct in the negative attitudes that they hold towards the majority of the trans population, and therefore don't need to fix anything, because there's nothing to fix. The second, and arguably more insidious part of this two-pronged approach is appealing to the pre-existing inferiority complexes in her trans audience. This is done by flaunting her success as a trans person, in addition to actively spinning things to make our whole community look like hypersensitive wokies at best and dangerous perverts at worst. This is why she provides greater visibility to people who fit the whole trans boogeyman archetype. Like, for example, Jessica Yaniv, the actual embodiment of the scary trans boogeyman that every single news outlet is terrified of. It's also why she makes up problematic behaviors where none exist, like in the case of Janae Marie Kroc. For those of you who don't know, Janae is a trans woman and a competitive weightlifter who has always competed in the men's category. Blaire actively misrepresented her as someone who competes against cis women, despite the fact that Janae herself has made statements saying that she would never do that. All of this to say, Blaire's approach not only validates the negative attitudes of her cis viewers, it also gives her trans viewers something scary to contrast themselves against. It feeds into the stereotypes in the media that we've been consuming since we were young. It feeds into the transphobia most of us have internalized. It feeds into the idea that we're lesser for not being cis, that we should be ashamed of our existence, or at the very least, ashamed of other trans people. She's basically providing both the poison and then the antidote. And I don't think that this is done with explicit intent. I don't want to give Blaire the credit of being that kind of manipulative mastermind. She's just going where the money is. But regardless of whether or not it's intentional, this is what she's accomplishing. The message that she's sending to transphobic cis people is that if this specific trans person can pull herself up by her bootstraps and perform to cis standards, any trans people who can't are either faking or lazy, and therefore it's okay to banish them to the outskirts of society. The message being sent to insecure trans people is that if you perform to these cis standards adequately, both in your own presentation and in denouncing other members of your community, you will be successful and you will be celebrated. But is she, though? I mean, successful, yes, that much is undeniable. However, I'm dubious of her claims that she's a vision of security that other trans people should aspire to be. And celebrated? Throwing yourself at the feet of people who are never going to accept you, let alone celebrate you, isn't exactly what I would consider a glowing example of self-respect. And that's why I wanted to make this video in the first place. You are so much better than that. And you are worth a lot more than this idea that your existence is something to be ashamed of, something to compromise over, or something to apologize for. You do not owe anyone a certain aesthetic or performative rejection of your trans identity to show that you are worthy of respect. Trans people are worthy of love and celebration, regardless of how well they perform to the standards set by and around cis people. And the cis people who really love us know that. We have to internalize that message too. And I know that challenging a belief that you've been taught to hold true from multiple different angles isn't an easy thing to do, but you owe it to yourself to at least try. Because while it might be too late for Blaire and people who have built their platform on a similar foundation, you still have the option. Just something to think about. I will see you next time, and as always, thanks for watching.